somebody came in and killed all the kids at an Amish school. I don't know if you remember that. Killed 13 Amish kids. And the Amish community, the person that killed them, the Amish community went out of their way to forgive that person. And not only that, but they went to go see this person that was in prison that had killed their kids. That made such an impression on Michael that he still talks about that today. That love, it's not generated by ourselves. I don't know if somebody has killed my kids, that's going to be a hard thing for me to go and forgive that person and go visit them. But that's what these people did. God's love changed their attitude in their lives to the point where they could go and visit somebody who had done this despicable things. And that was life-changing, Michael said, for him, for realizing that God can change us to the point where we could do something like that. And so visiting prisoners sometimes has different things on there. It might be, as Paul was talking about most likely in their day, is visiting they were in prison because they were Christians. But nowadays, we could have some people that are that way too, that we need to go visit.
I think that as far as our relating to a person, we may have a stronger obligation if it's a person who grew up in the church, whether or not they're practicing. But I think we have an obligation to show God's love to the prisoners, one way or another. And it's easy for me to say now that I'm retired, but it's not necessarily easy to do. But there is a church who have their people, their members in the prison, visiting cell to cell on a regular basis. And it isn't our church.
But our people here, do we always know what's going on with members? Sometimes we do. Other times we don't know what's going on with our members. Do we know them well enough that we, Sister Mary is in the hospital. We may not have seen her in the church for a while, wonder where she was, and then we find out she'd been in the hospital for 2 months, and nobody knew it. That's happened.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, and sad to say, it's happened
recently
more often than we would like to admit. But do we know enough about what's going on? And I know that there are sometimes people are, they don't want everybody to know what's going on, and they don't tell anybody what's going on. And then wonder why nobody is visiting them, but they've never told anybody that things are going on too. So, and
visiting isn't the only thing, because most of us, when we go to the hospital for any length of time, we're not here. We're all the way down in Reno, which is a long way for some of us to go, especially with the gas prices the way they are. So some people can't do the visitation in the hospital. And again, a card can be sent, but I remember recently I sent a card, and 2 weeks after I mailed it, it came back and said undeliverable,
address unknown, or person unknown, or unable to.
And so
person was still in the hospital.
They were still in the hospital, but they did not deliver the card to them. So I don't know what happened. I don't know whether the card even got to the hospital, but I assume it did. And maybe there was a screw up there. But 2 weeks it took for the card to get back to me. And I don't know. Anyway, but if you send a card, it means something to the person in the hospital. It does. And to the person in prison, sending a card, yeah, they're probably going to open it. They're probably going to read it. So, don't put anything in the card that you don't want seen by eyes you don't know, but
can't send a card that's got code on it.
Anyway, yeah, there's some, it can be difficult, but people who are incarcerated still need to know that God cares. And who's going to show them besides us? That's our job. Okay, we gotta move. The clock is ticking.
Yes.
So, did you have something?
Monday's lesson with covetousness and sexual immorality. And might be a little bit difficult to talk on some of those things, but the sexual immorality is a big thing. It keeps bringing that back up. Why? Because
it bombards us in this life. You can't drive down the road where there's billboards without seeing something. You can't turn on the TV without seeing something. It pops up on your social media. And I was getting text after text after text that were pornographic texts. And I didn't know why I was getting them or how to get rid of it.
she was getting multiple
I was
ones
getting-
a day. These texts that would come through.
27 of them one weekend, I think. And I was very frustrated. I was ready to change my phone number and quit having a phone altogether. I was fed up. I did not want this stuff.
You get
And you
bombarded.
couldn't get away from it. He found a way.
But that, the covetousness, this wanting what other people have, and also the text in there, it says, the love of money. Money isn't the problem, because sometimes people use that, the money is the root of all evil, but that's not what it says. It's the love of money is the root of all evil. And when that becomes our overwhelming problem, someone said, well, that's a rich person's problem. No. Sometimes the people that have more of a love of money than others are the people that don't have any. And it becomes an overwhelming drive on their part. A lot of times the people that are most addicted to gambling and other things are the ones that don't have the money to be gambling with. The ones that are buying a whole bunch of lottery tickets are the people that really can't afford to buy lottery tickets.
But on the other hand, some of the most generous people are poor.
Yes.
They have almost nothing, and they will give at in-gathering time. And, well, when we used to have in-gathering time, they will give. They don't have much, but they'll give. Probably because they understand what it's like to be in need, and they'll give.
It says here on Monday's lesson, it says, Paul warns the readers against sexual immorality and greed because they are two grave threats to brotherly love. New Testament authors and ancient moralists noted the connection between them. You know, and I think that sometimes we have a narrow view of honor. It says Paul calls to honor marriage, implied the avoidance of anything that would belittle it. Sometimes the problems that we have with marriage is not necessarily sexual immorality. It's putting other things in front of our marriage relationship, our families. We can carry that out and maybe expand it a little bit. We know that those things that keep us from a relationship with God become idols. Those things that keep us from spending time that we need to be spending with our families can in effect be idols also, so to speak. They can be those things that get in the way. And sometimes those are good things.
I knew of a
Work can become something that can get in the way of our families. I knew somebody that they were so, how would you put it? Zealous for their work and job that they neglected their family.
And I knew someone who, after he taught all day at the church school, he would stay in town and do Bible studies before going home to his family, which were way out of town. And, well, his wife got lonely. And there was a neighbor. And I think you can imagine the rest. He lost his whole family because He was so zealous to do the Lord's work.
That he neglected his family.
Your
Can we
family
do that?
needs to be your first mission field, doesn't it? Your first mission field. Those closest to you, I think. And that can be hard. Okay, let's move on to remembering your leaders.
We only have a couple things here somewhere.
Yeah.
That's something that sometimes is hard to do. We don't always, do you tell Pastor Manny how much you appreciate him? Have you asked him over to your house to have dinner?
Or somewhere else. Have you made connections on a social basis with him?
He needs to know, a pastor can sometimes have a discourage, because the devil works overtime on pastors to get them discouraged, because the discouragement is the devil's biggest tool, and sometimes pastors get discouraged, and we need to encourage them as much as we can. Write a note to Manny and say, we appreciate you for being our pastor.
And don't wait for October, which is Pastor Appreciation Month. Okay? Don't do that. Do it. If there's something special he does for you, do it then. Oh, you don't have to wait for something special. But there were a couple times I saw a pastor and he seemed down. When you know somebody pretty well, you can kind of clue in on those things. If they seem down, try to make a positive connection. Try to encourage somehow. Pastors are not immune. They're not immune. And they have struggles. I know with Pastor Manny, he's got a child at the high school, which has got to be a struggle right there. Plus, he's got his wife who's got an illness. If she's having a bad day, you know he feels it. You know he does. He has to. And I know she has bad days because she's human. And that illness does some nasty stuff to you. So consider that. Consider it. And sometimes somebody may not respond to you the way you expect. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe we need to give them one of our smiles, at least. Give them an encouraging word. Our times are rough, and everybody goes through bad days. But reading this, remember your leaders, in some ways we're all leaders, or we should be. And there's a song that it's not a new song anymore, it's older, but may all who come behind us find us faithful. Let the fires of our devotion light their way. And it keeps going, and I don't remember all the words. But the idea is there are people coming behind us. It's part of what kept me faithful when I was having a Sabbath issue. Because once I'd said something, I'd sort of committed. If I back off then, what happens when somebody else comes along and they have the same Sabbath issue and I backed off? I chickened out. What happens to them? Now they've got a deeper struggle and a more difficult struggle than I had. I got to keep that in mind. It's not just me. It's those of you who come behind me, or your kids when they come behind me. If I back down, and that's not meaning I have to be mean and nasty about it, but if I give in and if I give up, what happens to the others who come behind us? Okay.
As we talked about, I send Bible text out, and I send them to people, but I also put them on Facebook, and it was very interesting. A couple weeks ago, I had a Bible, I try to do encouraging Bible text, and somebody got in there and they had some obscure word in Revelation that they said, don't you know what such and such means? Because they went off someplace and
Some
their whole
tangent.
religion was on one word that I had never even heard of in Revelation. And they put this much stuff in on Facebook about this one word, and it says in here on Wednesday's lesson, beware of diverse and strange teachings. Sometimes we can take some obscure, some diverse, strange thing and make it our religion, whereas it's, and some of you understand what I'm talking about, because we've all come across something where somebody has come across, I have that one example where, as it says in Matthew, he is on the housetop, not come down, with the idea that when Jerusalem was surrounded and they were, and if you read the story, the Romans came, surrounded Jerusalem, and then all of a sudden they left. And Jesus had given them the admonition of what would happen, and so when that happened, all the Christians left Jerusalem, and they were out of there. Then when the Romans came back and destroyed Jerusalem, there was no Christians that were in Jerusalem at the time they had heeded that warning. But this person had that thing that ladies that have a bun on their head, top knot, should come down, because they worded that top knot come down. You probably heard that before, but their whole thing was on that, on ladies wearing buns in their hair.
Where they left out half the verse and added a K.
So anyways, it's sometimes you'll come across somebody that has some oddball thing that they picked up on, and they're going to carry that forever. Or you'll come across some other things, and they will argue those points till the cows come home on something that is not a salvation issue. And we need to concentrate on those things that are salvation issues and not be off on things that are not salvation, whether we've trimmed the edges of our beard or not, or something that somebody picked up. Because I've had somebody do that.
Well,
Are you trimming the edges of your beard? And you're going to be, and it's like that to them becomes a salvation issue. They pick up a little thing here or something that it might be a Bible text, but it's not a salvation issue.
well, there was some post on Facebook about Sabbath this morning. I think it was this morning. And an Orthodox Jew was out there trying to stop traffic because you're not supposed to drive on the Sabbath.
Jerusalem, and somebody that's on a tour right now in the Holy Land were in their hotel room, and they were watching this guy, and there was an Orthodox Jew, and he was trying to stop all the traffic because you're breaking the Sabbath by driving in a car. And so what he did is he got I don't know how he justified this one, but because it seemed like it would be kind of a lot of work, but he went and got a barrier and took it out there and put it in the middle of the highway. And then he left. And then it was a car crashed into it, and somebody, but he had left. Sometimes we put our things that are important to us and we try to put that on other people. I thought it was very interesting that he was in the restaurant there, and somebody had come up to him and they wanted him to open up the tea bag, and he says, well, he says, well, I can't open that up. It would be a sin for me to open that up
On Sabbath.
on Sabbath, but can you open it up? And so
Now, see, for us, we
I
think it would be just as bad for somebody else to do it for you
if
as
it's
to do
bad
it
enough for
ourselves.
me to do, am I right to have somebody else?
Because
do it?
our manservant, our maidservant, and the stranger within your gates. So anybody, you can't be asking them to do on Sabbath what
The other
you shouldn't do.
interesting thing is that I hadn't thought of in Jerusalem, in a hotel that's multiple floors. On Sabbath, the elevators stop at every floor. So nobody has to work and push a button to hit their floor number. It just stops at every floor, and then you can just get off.
Okay, I'm going to ask one question
That
before we
has
go,
nothing to do with anything.
because the clock says. Thursday's lesson's titled, Go to Jesus Outside the Camp. What are we talking about outside the camp? Are we needing to go to Jesus outside the church? What do we mean?
We were wondering about all this. Well, are we, I go back to what we started off with. Are we saved by the church or organization we belong to? No. Salvation is in Jesus, and we need to have our relationship with him is where our salvation is, not the church we belong to. If I have a membership card in church, I can't go to heaven and say, well, I got a membership card, let me in. That's not gonna be working. I don't know if that's what that means, but it's also talking about the filth and the bad stuff was outside. Even to the point of those that were lepers were outside of the camp of Israel. And but Jesus took the stuff on our sins, all that stuff on himself, and he was taken outside of Jerusalem and crucified outside of Jerusalem. And he took that, and he took it upon himself, knowing where it was going to lead. He took the sins and all of our bad stuff on himself, knowing that he was going to be dying on the cross
As
because of those sins.
as the worst of the
As
worst.
if he was that person that had all that stuff. And so,
So I think what they're talking about here is that because Jesus was crucified outside the camp, outside of Jerusalem, we have to go to Jesus at the cross. The cross was outside the camp. We have to go to Jesus where he is. And the cross especially, because the cross is where it all happened. The cross is what took care of us.
it also, it says that it was also the path for Moses, who chose to bear the reproach of Christ instead of the treasures of Egypt. Yeah. Those parts we need to be willing, as Christ was, to go there. And there's lots of different aspects of this lesson. It wasn't just a one subject lesson. It went around a little bit.
Our Father, you give us this lesson, and it's got so many things in it. We ask you to help us find ways to apply them in our own lives, our own personal lives, within our own personal means. We ask you to do that. But we also want to make sure that you know that what we want to do is reach you. We want to reach out to you and keep our grip on you and not rely on anyone else. But we also want to look at the others, encourage them to come along with us. Help us to hold tight to you, and please hold us back. Hold back to us so that we have a double grip, because our grip's not strong enough. We need yours. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.
Nung was determined to learn English. So when an Adventist English language center opened in her town in northern Laos, she jumped on the opportunity. She took this very seriously and came up with a goal to learn 100 new vocabulary words per day. Nung didn't have a background in English, but through hard work, she quickly began to understand the language. She faithfully attended classes and practiced with native English speakers until she became fluent. Speaking English made it possible for her to go to an Adventist university in Thailand. She's currently enrolled in Asia Pacific International University's education and psychology programs, and she hopes to use her new skills back home in Laos. The local Adventist English Language Center didn't only offer her the chance to learn English, it also provided a chance to learn about Jesus. Nung and her mother were among the first to join the center's weekly Sabbath worship services. At first, only 7 people gathered in a small home. Today, that number has grown to more than 100 people every week. Like many others, Nung and her mother gave their hearts to Jesus. In 2018, a portion of the 13th Sabbath offering helped expand this English language center. It has been a blessing to dozens of students like Nunn who have been able to explore new opportunities. Now you have the chance to contribute to another special school in Laos through this quarter's 13th Sabbath offering. Part of Laos has been very difficult for Adventists to reach. In 1957, Pastor Dick Hall and his wife and children came to the city of Luang Namtha to introduce Jesus to the Lao people. He worked for 4 years before they were forced to evacuate due to war. They left behind a handful of new believers who were still young in their faith. Today, there is only one Adventist left in the city. Luang Namtha has become a strategic location as Laos' northern gateway to China. An Adventist presence can help the community grow as the city expands. The Lao Adventist Mission plans to build a bilingual primary school here. With your contribution to the 13th Sabbath offering, they hope a new school can become an integral part of this community. Please support the work in this part of the world by contributing this quarter. Thank you for giving to the 13th Sabbath offering.